Our Saturday ritual was pure joy, until we turned the corner and saw the mob. But it was my 6-year-old daughter's innocent question that brought their hateful fury to a screeching halt. It was our Saturday ritual, the one constant in our little world of two. First, the swings at the park, where my daughter Lily, all of 6 years old and pure, unadulterated energy, would try to touch the clouds with her worn-out sneakers. Then, the grand finale, the reward for a week of good behavior and completed kindergarten homework, a visit to the Sweet Need. It wasn't just any bakery. It was our bakery. It was run by David and Tom, a couple whose smiles were as warm and sweet as the cinnamon rolls they sold. They'd owned the place for a decade, and it was the heart of our little neighborhood. Every Saturday, without fail, David would see us coming through the big glass window and have a small rainbow swirl cookie waiting on the counter for Lily. For my best customer, he'd say with a wink, and Lily would beam like he'd just handed her the keys to the kingdom. This Saturday started just the same. The sun was bright, Lily's laughter echoed through the park, and my heart felt full. I was 27, a single mom, and moments like these were the fuel that kept me going. They were perfect, simple, and ours. As we turned the corner onto Main Street, my hand holding Lily's small, slightly sticky one, I felt her tug to a stop. "Mommy, what are all those people doing?" she asked. My eyes followed her gaze, and the perfect Saturday morning shattered into a million pieces. There, in front of the Sweet Need, was a crowd. Not a happy, pastry-seeking crowd, but a tight, angry cluster of about 15 people. They were holding large, crudely hand-painted signs. My blood went cold. "God hates this shame," one read in thick, dripping red letters. "A bakery should be a family place," said another, the irony so thick it was suffocating. "Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve." My stomach twisted into a knot of pure, unadulterated rage. I could see David and Tom's faces through the window. They weren't smiling. They were standing behind the counter looking pale and defeated, like ghosts in their own cheerful shop. My first instinct, my only instinct, was to protect. "Oh, it's nothing, sweetie," I said, my voice tight. "Looks like the bakery is just too busy today. Let's go get ice cream instead." I tried to steer her away, to shield her eyes from the venom printed on those signs, from the pinched, self-righteous faces of the people holding them. But Lily was rooted to the spot. She wasn't scared. She was confused. She loved David and Tom. They were the men who knew her name, who always asked about her lost tooth or her new sparkly shoes. They were family in the way that only small-town neighbors can be. "But why are they mad at the cookie men?" she whispered, her voice full of genuine bewilderment. A woman at the front of the pack, who seemed to be the leader, turned her head at the sound of Lily's voice. She had sharp, bird-like features and a haircut that looked like a helmet. Her eyes, cold and gray, scanned over Lily, then landed on me with a look of smug pity. She saw a single mother and her child, and I could practically hear the gears of judgment turning in her head. She gave a slight, satisfied nod, as if our very existence proved her point. I tugged on Lily's hand harder. "Lily, let's go. Now." But my daughter had the stubbornness of 1,000 mules. She slipped her hand from mine before I could react. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of panic. "Lily, no!" I hissed, but it was too late. She took 3 small steps forward, right up to the edge of the curb, placing herself directly in front of the helmet-haired woman. The protesters who had been murmuring amongst themselves fell silent. Even the passing traffic seemed to quiet down. Every eye was on this tiny girl in a pink t-shirt standing before a wall of hatred. The lead woman looked down her sharp nose at my daughter, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. She clearly wasn't used to being the center of this kind of attention. Lily looked at the big sign the woman was holding, the one that proclaimed, "A bakery should be a family place." Her little brow furrowed. Her lips pursed as she thought. She looked from the sign to the woman's angry, twisted face, and then through the window at David and Tom, who were now watching the scene unfold with expressions of pure anguish. Lily's world was simple. She understood happy and sad, kind and mean. What she was seeing didn't make any sense. She pointed a small, trembling finger at the sign. Her voice, though small, was crystal clear in the tense, dead air. "That sign says family," she said, her tone one of genuine, innocent inquiry. She looked up, her wide blue eyes locking with the cold, gray ones of the woman. "But you're making the family inside cry. Why?" For a moment the world held its breath. The woman's face, which had been a mask of righteous fury, contorted into something else entirely. It was a flicker of shock, then a wave of pure, undiluted anger that a child, would dare to question her crusade. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. You could hear the hum of the bakery's refrigerators, the distant siren, the frantic beating of my own heart. The other protesters shuffled their feet, their eyes darting between my 6-year-old daughter and their leader, a sudden uncertainty clouding their faces. Lily's question, so simple and so pure, had acted like a mirror, forcing them to see the ugly reflection of their actions. They were making people cry. Finally, the woman found her voice. She knelt down, not in a gesture of kindness, but like a predator lowering its profile. Her smile was a tight, unpleasant slash across her face. "Well now, little girl," she began, her voice dripping with a sickly, sweet condescension that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "You don't understand. Those men in there," she pointed a bony finger towards the window, where David and Tom were now pressed against the glass, their faces etched with horror. "They aren't a real family. A real family has a mommy and a daddy. What they are doing is wrong. It's a sin. We're here because we love God, and we want to protect families like yours." That was it. The snap was audible, at least inside my own head. All my fear, all my desire to just flee, evaporated and was replaced by a white-hot protective inferno. In 2 long strides, I was there, planting myself firmly between my daughter and this venomous woman. I scooped Lily up into my arms, holding her tight against my chest with her face buried in my shoulder so she couldn't see the hate anymore. My voice, when I spoke, was low and trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in years. "You will not," I said, each word a shard of ice, "speak to my daughter. You will not try to pour your poison into her ears. You know nothing about family, nothing about love." The woman stood up, her face flushing a blotchy red. The mask of piety was gone, replaced by raw, ugly fury. "How dare you!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "We are here standing up for common decency, and you're letting your child be corrupted." Several of the other protesters surged forward, their signs now feeling less like cardboard and more like weapons. A man with a thick neck and a t-shirt that was too tight got right in my personal space. "You should watch who you're talking to," he snarled. My arms tightened around Lily, who had started to quietly sob into my shirt. My mind was racing, a frantic game of what-ifs. What if he pushes me? What if I fall? What if they hurt Lily? But before I could even formulate a response, another voice cut through the tension, deep and steady as a bedrock. "That's enough, Martha." Everyone turned. Standing on the sidewalk was Mr. Henderson, the owner of the hardware store across the street. He was in his late 60s, a man built of sawdust and quiet dignity, and he had been a fixture in this town since before I was born. He was holding a heavy-duty wrench in one hand, though he wasn't brandishing it. He didn't need to. His presence alone was an authority. He walked calmly forward, planting himself beside me. He didn't look at me or Lily. His disappointed eyes were fixed solely on the lead protester. "You've been out here for an hour making a nuisance of yourselves," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "Now you're harassing a mother and terrorizing her little girl. You've crossed a line. Go home." Martha's face twisted in humiliation. Being publicly admonished by Mr. Henderson was a significant blow in our small community. Her followers looked cowed, glancing at each other, the conviction draining from their faces. For a second I thought it was over. I thought they would just slink away. But then Martha's eyes narrowed, a malicious glint appearing in their depths. Her gaze shifted from Mr. Henderson and locked onto me. It was a look of cold, calculating recognition. She was searching for a weakness, a way to reclaim her power, and in that horrifying moment I saw that she'd found it. A slow, cruel smile spread across her lips. "I know you," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried across the now silent street. "You're Sarah Jenkins. You're a third-grade teacher at Northwood Elementary, aren't you?" My blood turned to ice. My stomach plummeted. "I wonder," she continued, her smile widening as she saw the sheer terror on my face, "what the school board and the PTA will think about one of their teachers so publicly endorsing this filth. I wonder if they'll think you're a suitable person to be around their children." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't a shout. It was a stiletto, slid quietly between my ribs. My job. She was threatening my job. Everything I had built for myself and Lily, our stability, our home, the very food on our table, was suddenly balanced on a razor's edge. Northwood Elementary wasn't just my workplace, it was my community, my calling. The thought of the PTAA group I worked with weekly, parents I considered friends, being poisoned against me by this woman, by this lie, was nauseating. The rage that had fueled me just moments before curdled into a cold, terrifying dread. I could feel my own blood drain from my face. Mr. Henderson stepped forward again, his shadow falling over Martha. "That's blackmail, Martha, and you know it," he said, his voice a low growl. "You leave this woman and her job out of it." But Martha just smirked, her eyes still locked on me. She had found my pressure point, and she was squeezing with all her might. "I'm just a concerned citizen," she said, her voice a saccharine mockery of innocence. "Concerned about the moral fabric of our community. Concerned about who is teaching our children their values." My mind spun. I held Lily tighter, her small, trembling body a stark reminder of what was at stake. I couldn't lose my job. I couldn't. I was a single mom. I didn't have a safety net. Panic was a rising tide, threatening to drown me. I saw it all playing out in my head, hushed conversations in the teacher's lounge, accusatory emails from the principal, parents pulling their kids from my class. A whole life unraveling because I stood up for two good men who sold cookies. Just then, the door to the Sweet Need creaked open. Tom emerged, his face pale, and his hands shaking. David was right behind him, his arm protectively around Tom's shoulders. Tom's eyes were red-rimmed, but they held a flicker of defiance. "Please," he said, his voice strained but clear. "Just leave her alone. This is about us, not her. She was just buying a cookie for her daughter." Martha turned her venom on him. "This is about all of you," she screeched, her composure finally shattering. "You bring this sickness into our town, and you corrupt everyone you touch. Look at her. She's defending you." She gestured wildly at me, as if I were Exhibit A in a case for moral decay. The scene was spiraling, growing uglier by the second. People were stopping on the street now. Phones were coming out, recording. This wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a public spectacle, and I was at the center of it. I had to get Lily out of there. That was the only thought that cut through the fog of fear. I turned to leave, to retreat, to take my daughter and run from this nightmare. But as I did, something small and warm pressed into my free hand. I looked down. It was David. He had slipped past Tom and was standing beside me. He didn't say a word. He just placed a small, paper-wrapped object into my palm. A rainbow swirl cookie. Lily's cookie. It was still warm from the oven. He looked me straight in the eye, his own filled with a mixture of terror and profound gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, so quietly only I could hear. "No matter what happens." That simple act, that small, defiant gesture of kindness in the face of such overwhelming hate, it was like a lightning bolt to my soul. It wasn't just a cookie. It was a symbol of everything these people were trying to destroy: friendship, community, decency. And in that moment, the fear didn't vanish, but something else rose up to meet it. A steely, stubborn resolve. I would not let them win. I would not let them terrorize my friends and threaten my life into silence. I turned back to face Martha, my spine straightening. Lily was still tucked against me, but I felt a new strength coursing through me. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. I had to show my daughter that you don't back down to bullies, even when you're scared. But before I could speak, another car pulled up to the curb with a screech of tires. It was a sleek black sedan, the kind that looks conspicuously out of place in a small town. The back door flew open, and a man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped out. He was older, with silver hair and an air of immense, unshakable authority. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the chaotic scene in an instant, taking in the signs, the angry faces, and finally, me, clutching my daughter. He walked directly towards Martha, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the pavement. The crowd parted for him like he was Moses, and they were the Red Sea. Martha stared, her mouth slightly agape, clearly thrown off balance by this unexpected arrival. The man stopped directly in front of her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Martha," he said, his voice calm, cold, and laced with an authority that dwarfed hers completely. "What exactly do you think you're doing to my son?" The word hung in the air, electric and stunning. "Son." Martha's jaw went slack. Her followers exchanged confused, panicked glances. My own mind reeled, trying to connect the dots. The impeccably dressed man turned his head slightly, his gaze softening as it landed on David, who was standing frozen by the bakery door. A flicker of emotion relief, fear, and a deep, complicated history crossed David's face. This man, this powerhouse in a suit, was David's father. Martha stammered, her carefully constructed self-righteousness crumbling into dust. "Mr. Peterson, I didn't know. You were just what, Martha?" Mr. Peterson cut her off, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "Harassing business owners? Terrorizing a mother and her child? Quoting scripture you clearly don't understand to justify your own bigotry." He took a step closer, and for the first time I saw a woman who had seemed so formidable look small and utterly terrified. "I sit on the board of the bank that holds the mortgage on your house. I am the primary benefactor for the community center where your Family First group meets, and my law firm, Peterson & Sons, the one my son was supposed to join before he chose his passion for baking over corporate law, represents half the businesses on this street." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle like a physical force. The other protesters began to back away, their hateful signs drooping, suddenly looking like the pathetic, flimsy pieces of cardboard they were. The man with the tight t-shirt looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. "So let me be perfectly clear," Mr. Peterson continued, his voice resonating with absolute finality. "You will take down your signs, you will apologize to my son, David, and to his partner, Tom. You will apologize to this young woman whose job you threatened with such disgusting glee. And then you will leave, and you will never, ever gather like this in front of my son's business again. Am I understood?" Martha could only nod, her face a mask of pale, humiliated shock. Without another word, she dropped her sign with a clatter. Her followers, seeing their leader defeated, scrambled to do the same, tossing their slogans of hate onto the pavement like discarded trash. One by one they mumbled apologies that were barely audible, their eyes fixed on the ground, before they scurried away, melting back into the town from which they'd emerged. In less than 2 minutes the crowd was gone. The ugly signs were all that remained, a testament to the hatred that had briefly occupied our street. Mr. Peterson watched them go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to me. The intimidating aura vanished, replaced by a look of weary kindness. "I am so deeply sorry you and your daughter were subjected to that," he said, his voice laced with genuine remorse. "Are you all right? And—" I managed a shaky nod, still clutching Lily, who was now peering out from my shoulder, her tears dried, but her eyes wide with bewilderment. He then walked over to the bakery door, where David and Tom stood, looking utterly stunned. He pulled David into a firm, brief hug. "I should have been here sooner," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He then looked at Tom and extended a hand. "Tom, it's good to see you." Tom shook his hand, a look of profound relief washing over his face. The tension between father and son was palpable, a story of its own, but in that moment what shone through was a fierce, undeniable love. Mr. Peterson turned back to the street. He looked at Mr. Henderson, who was quietly leaning on his wrench. "Frank," he said with a nod of respect, "thank you for standing up for what's right." Mr. Henderson just tipped his head. "Just being a good neighbor, John." The aftermath felt surreal. The sun was still shining. People were starting to emerge from the other shops, their tentative expressions turning to smiles as they saw the protesters were gone. A small crowd started to form, but this time it was a friendly one. Neighbors came over to clap Tom and David on the shoulder to ask if they were okay, to offer words of support. Someone started picking up the discarded signs and stuffing them into a trash can. The hate had been loud, but the love that followed was a quiet, steady, and overwhelming force. I finally set Lily down. She immediately ran to David and Tom, wrapping her little arms around David's legs. "Are you not crying anymore?" she asked. David knelt down and hugged her properly, burying his face in her hair for a moment. "No, sweetie," he said, his voice catching. "We're not crying anymore, thanks to you. That Saturday we didn't get ice cream. We stayed at the Sweet Need. David and Tom insisted on giving everyone free pastries, and the little bakery, which had felt so besieged just an hour earlier, was filled to the brim with laughter and chatter and the warm, comforting smell of sugar and cinnamon. It was a celebration. Mr. Peterson stayed, sipping a coffee and watching his son, not with the eyes of a disappointed lawyer, but with the unmistakable pride of a father. I sat with Lily at our usual table by the window, watching her happily munch on her rainbow swirl cookie. She had faced down a monster and hadn't even known it. She had just seen a family that was crying and asked why. And sometimes that's all it takes. Her innocent question hadn't just made their hateful signs fall. It had reminded a whole town what family and community really means.